This is one of the oldest self-portraits in the entire history of art. It was painted in the year 1500 by the German artist Albrecht Dürer, and since then, few have matched it. The work is extraordinary. It is executed with impressive mastery. The textures of the hair and the fur garment are rendered with astonishing detail, while the color palette, limited to browns and creams, conveys a great sense of sobriety. But what stands out most is the way Dürer portrays himself, with a striking resemblance to the image of Jesus Christ. And if we were to doubt for a moment who the model of the painting is, the inscription in the upper right clears any confusion. I, Albrecht Dürer of Nuremberg, painted myself in these works at the age of 28. Then the question arises, what was Dürer seeking by depicting himself in this way? The answer lies in a fundamental discovery of the Renaissance, a revelation that gave rise to a new pictorial convention that, in fact, changed the history of art forever. From a very young age, Dürer was surrounded by art. At the age of 11, he began working in his father's goldsmith workshop, where he learned to draw and engrave with precision. Shortly after, in 1486, at just 15 years old, he became an apprentice to the renowned Nuremberg painter Michael Wohlgemuth. Wohlgemuth's workshop was not limited to painting. It also designed stained glass and produced woodcuts. In fact, it is very likely that young Dürer took part in the creation of the Nuremberg Chronicle, an ambitious universal history illustrated with no fewer than 1,800 woodcuts prepared in that very workshop. During his youth, Dürer traveled extensively. He spent time in Frankfurt, Cologne, and Basel until in 1494 he undertook a long journey to Italy. In those years, he worked on multiple engraving projects and was able to perfect his technique. Just a year later, in 1495, he had already established his own workshop in Nuremberg. His talent quickly made him stand out, and his fame as an illustrator and engraver spread across Europe. So when he painted his celebrated self-portrait in 1500, Dürer was already a recognized figure throughout the continent. Perhaps the first reaction when seeing this painting is the immediacy with which the artist makes himself present. Dürer is right there, directly in front of us, occupying the entire space. He is not part of a larger setting or scene. He appears isolated, set against a dark background. As viewers, we find ourselves alone with the artist. His resemblance to Jesus Christ is undeniable. In Dürer's time, there circulated a belief that there was an authentic testimony about Christ's appearance, supposedly written by an eyewitness. This account appeared in a letter attributed to a Roman official, Lentulus, who was said to be a contemporary of Jesus and offered a physical and personal description. He is a man of medium size, he has a venerable aspect, and his beholders can both fear and love him. His hair is of the color of the ripe hazelnut, straight down to the ears, but below the ears wavy and curled, with a bluish and bright reflection flowing over his shoulders. It is parted in two on the top of the head after the pattern of the Nazarenes. His brow is smooth and very cheerful, with a face without wrinkle or spot, embellished by a slightly reddish complexion. His nose and mouth are faultless. His beard is abundant, of the color of his hair, not long, but divided at the chin. His aspect is simple and mature. His eyes are changeable and bright. He is terrible in his reprimands, sweet and amiable in his admonitions, cheerful without loss of gravity. He was never known to laugh, but often to weep. His stature is straight, his hands and arms beautiful to behold. His conversation is grave, infrequent, and modest. He is the most beautiful among the children of men. When comparing Dürer's self-portrait with Lentulus's letter, the connection becomes clear. The artist, so to speak, dyed his hair the color of ripe hazelnut, even though in his other self-portraits his natural tone appears different. His long locks fall over his shoulders, and his complexion is idealized, radiating beauty. Looking closely at his light eyes, one notices they do not focus directly on the viewer, but rather hold a distant, contemplative, almost unsettling gaze. It is reasonable to think that Dürer was familiar with this description of Christ, since the letter was first printed in Germany in 1474 in the Life of Christ by Ludolf the Carthusian, and later published in Nuremberg in 1491 in the Introduction to the Works of St. Anselm. For a long time, it was accepted as an authentic account based on first-hand observation. It is not surprising then that many artists of the period used this text as a reference for their depictions of Jesus. From it, a certain look emerged that eventually became standard in Christian art, visible in the works of masters such as Jan van Eyck and Leonardo da Vinci. In these portrayals, Christ is often shown frontally against a dark background, with long hair, perfectly symmetrical features, and frequently raising his hand at chest height in the act of blessing. Dürer's portrait, almost life-sized, follows these conventions with striking fidelity. Today we know that Lentulus's letter was in fact a forgery, and yet the question remains, why did Dürer deliberately choose to portray himself in the likeness of Jesus Christ? The answer lies in the details of the painting itself, which reveal even more clues about the magnitude and meaning of this work. But before we continue, let me remind you that this painting is already available on the website. You can get it either as a framed canvas or as a fine art print. If you enjoy art as much as I do, I invite you to explore the full catalogue, where you'll find more than 700 carefully selected works, each accompanied by its story. Shipping is completely free, and by purchasing through the store, you'll also be supporting me in creating more videos like this one. You'll find the link in the description. Now then, let's continue. The coat Dürer wears is lined with sable fur, an animal about the size of a cat, belonging to the weasel family and native to Northern Europe. Interestingly, sable fur was also a common material used in the making of paintbrushes. If you look closely, you can see how Dürer holds the fur between the tips of his right-hand fingers, creating an unusual position with his thumb and other fingers. Art historians often interpret this peculiar gesture as highly symbolic. In Dürer's time, paintings were usually made on commission, while woodcuts and metal engravings were produced for speculative sale. With this in mind, it is likely that this self-portrait was not created for a specific patron, but as an exercise in virtuosity, a way for Dürer to demonstrate both his keen powers of observation and his extraordinary technical skill in depicting textures and facial features. Still, there can be no doubt that the portrait was designed to evoke the image of Christ. Dürer depicts himself staring directly at the canvas, a pose common in late medieval Northern European representations of Jesus, but unusual in secular portraiture. His hand gesture can also be read in another way. The thumb and index finger form an A, while the index and middle finger form a D. Together, they evoke the initials of the artist, AD, echoing the monogram with which Dürer signed many of his works, and which also appears painted in the upper left corner of this portrait. In this sense, the arrangement of his fingers becomes a self-referential motif, and the fact that they touch sable fur, the very material used in paintbrushes, seems to remind us that his social standing ultimately rests on his mastery of the brush. For this reason, his resemblance to Christ should not be seen as a blasphemous gesture. Rather, his contemporaries most likely understood it within the spiritual tradition of the Imitatio Christi, the practice of following the example of Jesus as a model of pious Christian life. Through this symbolic gesture, Dürer elevates his craft to a higher plane. This self-portrait is not merely a likeness of his face, it is a declaration of his identity and the purpose of his life. In other words, Dürer asserts that his artistic talent is both exceptional and divinely bestowed. That said, I'd love to know your opinion about this painting. Why do you think Dürer chose to portray himself in this way? What purpose do you think he had in mind? I'd be delighted to read your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you found it interesting. See you in the next video.